Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Meta Cafe. My name is Janet Hickox, and I'm an astrologer and human design consultant. And grab your cup of coffee or tea or water, whatever is your pleasure, and sit back and enjoy some astrology and some human design perhaps today. And let's talk about the weekend. Yay, it's finally Friday. Not that I would know the difference because I don't know. This week just went somewhere. I don't know. I guess maybe because I've been busy with my kitty cat. I don't know. I just sort of lost all track of time. And when my husband said it was Friday, I went, oh my gosh, I got to get busy because I have to get everybody's stuff together for the weekend. Good morning, Katie. Good morning, Roseanne. Good morning, Michelle. And good morning, Suzanne. It's good to see you out there. And it's good to have you with me this beautiful morning in the Northwest. I think we're supposed to get close to 50 to 55 degrees this weekend. Woo-hoo. Seattle said 60, but I'm a little north of Seattle, so I'm betting we're going to be a little cooler. But it's bike riding weekend. I'm sure of it. I'm excited for that. So I have a lot to get to today, and probably more that I could add in, but sometimes I'm afraid I'm overwhelming you guys. You know, since you're out there, just kind of tell me, do you think that we spend too much time in the mornings? Just the right amount of time in the morning, or would you like more time in the morning to talk about astrology and so forth? I'm just kind of curious because I watch the different timing on the videos when I process this into a video for YouTube. It's usually between about 30 minutes and sometimes 45 minutes. And I wonder sometimes if that's just too long or if that's just too much information. Or maybe you're like me and you could go on forever and ever and ever and ever talking about astrology. And so you want more. So just let me know. It looks like Roseanne says, no, not overwhelmed. Awesome, Roseanne. And Suzanne says, oh, well, I would love more. Wow, I love it. I'm sure we could talk about this stuff. And Roseanne says more, but I'm also greedy. She's also a Scorpio, so anytime she can get to the depth of things, she's happy. So today, we're going to start out by talking about the moon. And I want everybody to sit back and think for a moment about times in the past where we've talked about the moon and the cycle of the moon. Because the moon today is in a square to the sun. So it's in its 90-degree challenging angle to the sun. And when we were talking about the moon and how it moves, love the Gemini cup. Yes, I know it's my favorite cup. But I can't really drink coffee anymore as I'm talking to you all because it tends to clog up my throat. I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it's my body telling me something like you don't need coffee, maybe tea would be better. I don't know. Anyway, so when we were talking about the cycle of the moon, we talked about the new moon that represents a new beginning, right? Then about a week later, we have the first square to the moon to the sun, excuse me, which brings up the first crisis point, if you will, in whatever it was that was new at the new moon. And we call that the crisis of action. It's almost like you come to a point where, yeah, I was really excited and I want to get this project up and going, and something's come up that appears to be like a little block in your path, or some kind of resistance within you comes up. Hard to say exactly what it is because it could be different depending on the situation, but it does create this crisis point. Then we get to the full moon. And I know we've often thought of the full moon as something like the completion of something. And in my head, a few years ago, I was thinking of it as the completion of what we started at the new moon. But it can't be, right? It can't be because that's only halfway through the cycle. What it really is, the full moon brings us to a point of aha, of revelation, of an epiphany, or of in some way being able to complete something, move something out of the way in order to continue down our path of creation. And then we have the point that we're at today, which is the square called the crisis of consciousness. So I was really thinking about that this morning. It's a good thing my husband had to be at work early because I was already researching at 6:30 this morning. And I thought, you know, what does it mean to have a crisis of consciousness? What does that mean for us? Because it's enough to say it. I think I have an idea of what that means. I think I have a version of what I could tell you all as far as what does it mean to have a crisis of consciousness. But that's not enough, right? It's not enough. I've got to really be able to describe this, because in that, it gives me and you a better idea of what it is that we as humans can do at this point in our transit with the moon. So the crisis of consciousness. So I looked this, if you put it in on Google, you get a bunch of different things. Mostly they want you to think of it in terms of a crisis in conscience. And that was not the word I typed in, but that's what it kept giving me, was conscience. And I don't want the conscience. I want the conscious. I want to look at what's going on for me and for all of us in the world at the level of the soul, at the level of our awareness of who we are, what we're doing here, and how all of these different things work for us or don't work, such as the case may be, right? These are days right now where it's in a square, so it could be something that's not working. But the crisis of consciousness, when the moon is squaring the sun at the very end, just before the new moon, is a point of maturing inwardly, inward maturity. And that made a lot of sense to me because Jupiter turned retrograde yesterday, right? The giant gas planet that brings us growth and expansion turned to its inward face. And so it's right and perfect, isn't it, that we're bringing up this idea of growing consciousness, which is an inward and a depth-oriented process. So if we're looking at consciousness then, and we're supposed to be maturing inwardly as souls, then what I think it brings us to is this idea of survival mode versus enlightenment, right? So at one end, we are always working to live and survive, right? It puts us in the spleen, if we're talking human design, right? In the spleen, we have the energy of survival. And because it's the energy of survival, it's also the energy of fear, right? Fear is sitting on the spleen. The cool thing about fear in the spleen is that the moment you recognize it, the moment you pull yourself back to being in the now and you realize I'm okay, then the fear just sort of disappears or evaporates, dissipates, moves on. And then you have the ability to go clear forward again. So I wanted to think about the very word of that, right? It brings up crisis of consciousness, right? So it brings us to what is dominant on this planet anyway right now, which is crisis, right? Everything seems to be a crisis. And in this crisis, we create wars, war on drugs, war on terror, war on guns, war on women, war on black men, blah, 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 right? We have these wars, not literal wars, but sometimes they are literal wars where we, out of a crisis moment, create the us versus them separation kind of energy. And then we go down the rabbit hole of blame and victimhood, or even to the energy of life being a roller coaster with these ups and downs, which keeps us locked into survival mode. So when we reach this point in the moon, we have a choice. And the choice is about, do we bring consciousness or do we bring survival mode? More of the same or something new? And enlightenment, let's talk about that. So I brought it out here, my Course in Miracles book, right? Course in Miracles, lovely book. And the Course in Miracles, I think I read this to you last week, but I'm going to read it to you again because I like this saying. So the idea of enlightenment is to recognize Dustin Hatfield. Who's Dustin Hatfield? Roseanne, I don't know who that is, so tell me what you're thinking there. Anyway, so when we're reaching for enlightenment, we are looking at reality as an illusion, that everything that we see out here is really of our own making. It's an illusion, right? It's something that we create. And if we create our reality, what are we creating, right? How are we creating it? And so when we look at the Course in Miracles, the answer is here. And so this is the introduction. So it's the very first, page that you see in there. Oh, you can see my to-do list from yesterday. So the introduction of the Course in Miracles says, this is a Course in Miracles. It is a required course. Only the time you take it is voluntary. And Roseanne, you're going to love this part. Free will does not mean that you can establish the curriculum. It means only that you can elect what you want to take at a given time. The course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love, for that is beyond what can be taught. It does aim, however, at removing the blocks to the awareness, i.e. consciousness, of love's presence, which is your natural inheritance. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. Fear can't be real. This course can therefore be summed up very simply in this way. Nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Now, if you chew on those words for a while, and you may have to get your own Course in Miracles book, or maybe I'll post that later if y'all like that saying, because it is profound. Because what it seems to be saying is that only love is real. So when you're in a crisis moment, or when you're having these issues, if you step back away from the crisis and bring some consciousness to it, what you see is you are being presented with an opportunity. Your son, Suzanne, who you say is having a crisis, is having a crisis. This is an opportunity for him to do something different, perhaps, to strengthen his resolve to be who he wants to be in this life, to look at the world in a new way. Sometimes we have to take the world and we have to turn it upside down and see things from a different perspective, because it's only from our limited perspective that we see things through the lens of survival or fear. And I know this is hard because I find myself here all the time, right? I find myself sometimes waking up in the middle of the night worrying about shit I don't have no business worrying about at 1 a.m. or 3 a.m, or 3:33, because that's when I seem to get wakened up. So it makes me really want to tell people about this point in the cycle of the moon, because if it's bringing up something for you that's blocking your path forward, that what you have to do is just perceive it differently. Realize that the block is just an illusion. The block is just a call for you to bring more awareness and more consciousness to whatever it is that's happening around you. In your life, in your son's life, in your spouse's life, in your friends' lives, in whatever way crisis is appearing in your life, or this consciousness raising potential, however that is showing up in your life, it is really just a call for you to bring more love to your life, to bring more consciousness to what's happening. Okay. Oh, I also have a quote. This was from my search for what it doesn't mean to have a crisis of consciousness. And this is from James Robinson. And I think I can't remember the name of the website. I think it was something like selfawareness.com. Don't quote me, but you'll find it if you also Google crisis of consciousness. He says something rather profound. Rather than trying to fix the planet, we would accomplish far more if we were charitable, kind, forgiving, and compassionate. Rather than criticizing anyone, we would change the world if we let go of our fear and simply enjoyed what we are doing at the moment. Rather than comparing ourselves to others, if we accepted what is as a gift and be truly grateful, then the world would become a wonder-filled universe. Now, I got to tell you, that one sentence, wonder-filled universe, actually that's a phrase, gives me goosebumpies, because remember yesterday as well, Pluto moved out of gate 54, the gate of the search for enlightenment, and into the gate 61, which brings us into awe and wonderment. I don't make this stuff up, right? I can't make this stuff up. This is a journey. I'm a seeker, and these things just come up for me to share with you. There is nothing wrong with the world. It just is. There is nothing wrong with others. They are just a reflection of our perception. Now, if that doesn't curl your hair, I don't know what will. There is nothing wrong with us. We are simply here to be happy no matter what happens. If we focus on our own paths, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing. James Robinson is his name. I thought that was a rather profound statement or sentence or paragraph. It brings us again to that realization that we are creating our reality. And the only part of free will that we really have is in how we perceive what's going on around us. And then to realize that we're the creators of all of this. And what do I want to create now? So, we framed this several weeks and months back in terms of reaction versus action, right? When something happens to us, or when something happens in our outer world, our knee jerk is the reaction, right? And our knee jerk might be to blame, to cast aspersions, to vilify, to separate ourselves away from that other person or from that instance. And yet, if we stepped back, we would be able to perceive what is really going on. What is the higher purpose behind everything that's happening? And what is it that you're perceiving? This is all about being able to draw all of this inward and to be able to see, what is this? Why am I seeing this in my world? What is it serving? How is it serving me? Does it ever stop? Suzanne asks. Well, crisis, do you mean, or survival? Because either way you look at it, it's a choice. And does it ever stop? When you choose to start seeing the world in a new way from a point of enlightenment, nothing can bother you, because as the Course in Miracles says, nothing real can be threatened and nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. Just wanted to make sure I said that correctly. So do we need it to stop? Well, here's how I look at that. But then I'm very willing to do this deep dive dumpster stuff, right? I'm really good at self-evaluation and self-reflection. Some people don't want to go there, and that's okay. But anything that happens in my outer world, I'm still like you, and I react. I react all the time. Just ask my husband. I was driving last night, and he's like, oh, no road rage, okay? So I still react, because I sometimes forget that I'm creating this reality and that everything in this reality is serving me in that moment for something. So if you can, twist the way you look at things, right? Turn it upside down on its head and look at it differently. Thank you, Roseanne. Roseanne says, which is why I love you. And then I air it all out here on the daily, or the energy report, so everybody can see that I am too still evolving, and that I invite you to join me in this evolution, right? Because we're all in this together. And if we, at some point in our evolution, I hope that we will be able to have a completely different understanding of what crisis means. And that crisis doesn't have to take us into the toilet. It doesn't have to take us into that fear place where we knee jerk and we bomb somebody, or we, cut them off out of our lives, or we, malign them or say bad things about them. And I'm going to tell you, I'm still guilty of doing that myself, because I look at the outer world sometimes and it just boggles my mind as to what's going on out there. But then I have to ask myself, why am I seeing that? How is that serving me? And it's not that, when we come into this planet is a place of growth and evolution. The soul comes here specifically to experience crisis, to experience pain and suffering and wounding in order to grow and evolve. So the quick answer is, the way to make this stop is to greet every instance that comes up in your life with a different form of consciousness, right? With eyes wide open, and being able to step back and go, what does this mean for me? What is this showing me? How do I want to react to this instead of knee-jerk reaction? I hope that makes sense to everybody. All right. So, God, how do I follow that up? Okay, so let's go back to some astrology. So today we have the moon squaring the sun. So in your own personal lives, somewhere you might meet up with that crisis of consciousness. And I think we've already talked enough about that maybe, hopefully, you have a new way of being able to deal with that when it comes up. But today the moon is also in getting closer and closer to conjuncting Mars, and also trining Uranus. Conjunction, same space. Trine, 120-degree angle, ease and flow of energy. So I want to say something about the moon conjuncting Mars, because the moon takes us to the emotions, right? It takes us to the past, and Mars brings impulsivity into the picture, knee-jerk reactions and all that fun stuff, right? When someone says something we don't like, we spit back at them, or we take actions that we don't necessarily mean. But I want you guys to understand that Mars and the moon are also at the galactic center, or so close to it. I mean, the galactic center is huge, so it doesn't matter if it's like 10 degrees away, it's still pulling in this wonderful cosmic energy. And Natasha, love to see you out there. Crisis is the, I'm going to put this up. This is lovely. Crisis is the opportunity the universe gives us to get another set of wings to fly and walk in life and not crawl. Love it. Spoken like a true mistress of enlightenment, which we all are, every one of you, right? It doesn't matter how enlightened you think you are here to master this, right? Everyone is, in whatever way it is you need to. All right, back to the moon and Mars at the galactic center. So instead of reacting badly to anything that shows up today, instead of being impulsive and knee-jerk and lack of consciousness into the things that you do, remember that we are being bathed right now with the cosmic energy coming at us from the galactic center through Mars and the moon, through our emotions and through our actions. So, and know that emotions are very much sometimes knee-jerk, right? They're juicy when they're happy-go-lucky, lovely, wonderful emotions. And then sometimes they're messy when they're the anger and frustration and ugliness part of the emotional wave. But it's all true, right? It's all about who we are. So checking in with your emotional self before you actually switch in the gear of action can help create more consciousness for yourself. And in the more consciousness you have, that spills out to the people around you. So basically, bottom line, try to stay out of any kind of impulsive action today. You've got to remember that the moon is also in the waning phase of its transit, right? It started at the new moon. We're now headed back to the new moon. So this isn't a good time to start something new. This isn't a time to impulsively begin something. However, if you've already been in the throes of something and creating something, this is a good time maybe to step back and reevaluate what you're doing and to see how you can bring more consciousness or light to the project. The moon in a trine with Uranus also brings us that aha, right? That moment, that awakening. And so I think overall for today, that makes a great sort of energy for the day. But this is also us going into the weekend. So what are we doing this weekend? So let's see. I want to check something because I realized something. Yes. So today is March 9th, Friday, and the moon is going to be void of course. And it says that the moon is void of course from 9:27 p.m. tonight on the East Coast to 4:27 a.m. tomorrow morning, which means, whoa, we're in our social hours, people. We don't have to too much worry about anything at work or in our day-to-day lives that's going to interfere with the moon in terms of being void of course and not having a lot of energy. For us on the West Coast, that is 6:27 p.m. to 1:27 a.m. And then the moon will move out of Sagittarius, where it's been for the last day or so, into Capricorn. And it will stay in Capricorn for the weekend, all the way, let's see, through to, Monday, the 12th is on Monday. Yep. So not until Monday will it change signs again. So we don't even have to worry about void of course moon until Monday. But we're going to talk about that too. So the void of course moon is much more in support of being social, having fun, resting, relaxing, doing yoga, meditating, chilling, binge watching, whatever. My son's binge watching The Heart of Dixie right now. Great show, by the way. I binge watched that last year. And just sit back and relax. Make the evening an evening of relaxation and just camaraderie with whomever is in your home. So through the weekend, though, we have the moon in Capricorn. And the moon in Capricorn is sometimes deliberate and sometimes stuffing back its emotions, right? The moon brings up emotion. The moon is ruled in by Cancer, or Cancer the moon rules the sign Cancer, which is the opposite sign from Capricorn. So there could be emotional outbursts, especially if you've been holding back emotion. There could be emotional stuffing, like someone may trigger you emotionally and you stuff down the emotion rather than processing it. And when I say processing, I don't mean that you vomit out there on that person all the emotional energy, that you work through it on your own. And then you're able to work through it with that person in a more conscious manner. If it's a person that's triggered you, if it's a situation that's triggered you over the weekend, same thing, right? That we step back, evaluate what's going on, and then we are able to work through it with consciousness rather than those knee-jerk kind of actions. This is a very earthly placement for the moon, right? In that it's practical energy. It's down to earth energy. So maybe it's a good time if you're in an area where you have some decent weather to get the ground ready for spring, right? To get the ground ready to plant, pulling up some of the weeds, doing that kind of thing this weekend is very satisfying with the moon in Capricorn. It'll also make you feel like I've got something done. It also gets you out in the air and out in the world doing things different than you would normally do in your day-to-day life. Unless, of course, you're a landscaper, in which case the last thing you probably want to do is be pulling the weeds or getting the ground ready at your house. But indeed, I was, even here in the Northwest, I was at the store yesterday and I noticed, oh my gosh, all the different pansies and petunias, not petunias, what's that other flower that comes up here? Primroses and heather and all kinds of beautiful flowers that are starting to come up and indicate, our early springtime. So getting outside, doing some bike riding, doing walking, just getting out in the air, assuming that it's not snowing and blizzard in your part of the world. Roseanne says snow here this weekend. So put on your gloves and your snow boots and you go outside and play in the snow. How often do you get a chance to do that? I mean, in some places in the world, they get a lot of chances to do that, and maybe that's boring stuff, so do something different then. But if you're going to have snow and you don't normally have snow, get out and play with it. Be a kid. Dispel some of that more stodgy energy that Capricorn can sometimes have. And I mean stodgy in a loving way. Sometimes they get so caught up in their practical everyday life that they forget they're here to have fun too, right? Have fun. All right. Anything else that I want? Oh, yes. I wanted to quickly give you guys a heads up that over the weekend, we don't have a void of course moon, but as luck would have it, Monday morning, when we all have to get back to the grind, the moon moves void of course. If you're on the East Coast, that happens at 11:36 a.m. and goes on throughout the rest of the day till 6:44 p.m. So literally, you have important things to do on Monday. Get them done early if you're on the East Coast. Unfortunately for us on the West Coast, it's kind of the opposite. Our time, it is 8:36 a.m. and goes until 3:44 p.m. So if you have something important to do, try to make it after 3:45 in the afternoon. And that is just the way it goes, right? Sometimes Mondays are those really bad days, or not. I don't want to characterize it as good or bad because then I'm falling into the same trap, right? But the energy isn't necessarily supportive on Monday for doing anything big, anything new, anything splashy. It is really much more, how do I want to characterize this? More inward, more quiet, less action, and more consideration. And then that too shall pass, and you'll be able to move through the day once we move into, the moon moves into Aquarius. So as we start the week next week, we begin in the energy of the quirkiness, if you will, of Aquarius. So I love that. Roseanne, you're going to love that, of course, too. So everybody, it's going to be a good weekend. It's probably one where we'll want to get, our noses to the grindstones in some way, where we want to maybe make sure we're getting things done. And maybe it's opening up the windows if you're somewhere and letting the spring air come in, or late winter, early spring air come in. And other than that, I think we have a great day. Just remember today we have that void of course moon. Luckily, it happens at the end of the day. So for the most part, we're able to just relax and be ourselves and be at peace and be in love. And if anybody has any questions or comments about anything we talked about today, put them in the comments section. I do go back afterwards and I go through the comments and try to respond to everybody's questions or comments. And I love you all. Thank you so much for joining me in the morning for these talks. And I will see you Monday morning. BTW, by the way, next week may be an interesting week not because of my cat this time, which, by the way, take a look at her. She's just laying there. She puts her back to me because she knows she's okay in my room. I put my sweatshirt on the bed so she could cuddle up in it. She's my baby. What can I say? Speaking of babies, the reason my week may get a little wonky next week is because I may have a grandson being born on or around the 14th or 15th. Maybe even the 16th. So if one morning or one day, it'd be morning, I don't show up and you don't see anything, it's because my grandson made his appearance. And so I'm just warning you for that ahead of time, because got to be there. If I can be there, I got to be there. And his name is Wyatt. His name is Wyatt Hunter Hickox, I believe. Unless, of course, they've changed that since I last talked to them yesterday. So, yes, I'm very excited. This will be my 7th grandchild. I have 6 right now. My one daughter has 4, and my other daughter has 2. And my son Brian is the one. His girlfriend is having this baby, and she has 2 children already. So I have 2 rent-a-grandkids and 6 birthed grandchildren and a 7th one on the way. So I am truly blessed. I have a huge family, and I love every one of them. And I can't even imagine my life without them. Oh, which makes me remember something that I wanted to share with you guys today. Okay, do you guys have a few more minutes to chat with me? I have all the time in the world today. Yesterday, remember earlier in the week, I had this aha about our human design and how I wanted to really look at how we weave that together. And so I did that with Michelle G, and with Roseanne this week. Well, when I was looking at Michelle's chart, something occurred to me, and I couldn't get out of it at that moment because we were already talking and I just couldn't research it further. But I realized that looking at the design column, the red numbers, in light of the same astrology chart that I had pulled, isn't going to work. Why? Because that red column is based on a date that's about 90 astrological degrees, 88 astrological degrees, but about 90 days prior to birth. So the charts aren't the same. So yesterday I decided to pull, I was using myself as a model. So yesterday I pulled a chart for the day. So I was born June 19th. So my design date is March 20th. And isn't it interesting that I'm doing this right at about the same time that I'm coming to that date in my life? It's kind of interesting timing wise. So I'm looking at the 2 charts and I realized something. I need to know more about what those 2 columns of numbers represent. If I'm going to pursue this and I'm really going to weave this all together in a very coherent way, I need to really understand what those 2 columns of numbers represent. So I went on a hunt. I mean, I've heard all the different things and I know what I say about it, but I wondered if there was something deeper, if someone had actually taken this deeper. Here's what I found. So the personality column is the numbers that are all in black. It is based on your birth date. And this is where we have conscious awareness of who we are. When I describe to people what their conscious line sun is, or their personality sun, personality conscious, same thing, they're very readily recognize that as a trait that they're expressing. It is the black numbers are who we think we are and what we think we are. It is our soul identity. And here's where things get wonky for me. It is the eternal you. It is the mind, the witness. So when you consider who is it that's in my head thinking, this is what is coming. It's the soul, of course. It is the soul that's in the personality column. But we tell people that the design is the date that the soul came to be in the body. So now I'm like, okay, now I'm crazy, right? I'm crazy conscious here about how am I presenting this to people. So The personality column represents you, the outer expression of your soul, what you came here to do, who you came here to be. But it is not designed to be in charge, but to sit back and enjoy the ride. One person that I looked up said, equated the personality column, the black column, the consciousness, to being the passenger, right? The passenger, the onboard passenger. And this is still settling through me, so I don't have it all set up yet in a way that I really connect with, but I'm getting there. Now, the design side brings up something really, really interesting. It is the nature of your unconsciousness. In the design column are traits that are not so obvious to you, but your family, your friends, the people like you guys viewing me here probably see some traits that I don't see in myself. As we are evolving and growing and maturing, we find more and more of those traits, right? We come to connect with them. But the real truth in the design is that it is your biogenetic inheritance. How many times when I've done human design readings have I told people that your body holds wisdom, holds intelligence, and that we are meant to defer to our body's wisdom as opposed to our mind's wisdom. So the personality column is really our mind's wisdom, where the design column is the body's wisdom. You could consider it, if the personality is the passenger, then the design is the vehicle. And in it is all of your innocence. What do I mean by that? Not sure that I know what I mean by that yet. Innocence in that it's not quite something that you can connect with yet. So it has a mystique to it. It has a hidden component to it that we have to explore throughout our lives. But rarely do we get in our bodies enough to be able to say, what's going on here? Right? We really defer to the mind. And we're not necessarily designed to allow the mind to be in charge. I would say that that's the biggest problem on the planet, is that our minds are in charge. And so anyway, more on this subject as I continue weaving this story together. Don't be surprised if I call on some of you to let me peek into your charts and go deeper. So I just had to bring that up before I signed off for the day, for the weekend. And I will let you know more when I discover more. And in the meantime, I love you all. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday morning. Take care.